Hi everybody, this is Kevin with Garrison Dental Solutions, and we are tackling the top 5 questions that sectional matrix users or people who want to use a sectional matrix system, what they ask us. So we've been making matrix systems now for over 20 years, and there has been a pretty consistent theme to the questions that we get asked. So we thought we'd do a series of videos tackling those most common ones, and today we're on number 3, and that question is simply, how do I get those matrix bands in place when I haven't broken contact? Now we're going to expand on that a little bit today after we deal with how to get the bands in when contact is not broken. We're going to tackle a couple of basic band placement tips that might help you out as well. So first of all, what do you do if you've got this tiny little restoration and the contact is not broken? There are a couple of things, and we're going to start with the easiest one and the most sure one right off the bat here, and that is a very simple technique called FenderWedge. This is a FenderWedge. It is a metal shield with a wedge on the bottom, and if you look at that x-ray and you see that looks like it's going to be a fairly small restoration. Now this one of course is open, but we're going to pretend it's not, okay? So what you would do is, before you start to prep the tooth, you place a FenderWedge in there. Now that is going to start to stretch those ligaments out while you're cutting the prep, and as an added little benefit, it's going to protect that adjacent tooth from inadvertent damage from your burr. So first of all, it's going to speed up your prep process, particularly if you're next to a old composite, gosh, you just touch that stuff and that burr just digs right in. So having this protection in there is going to make the prep process easier and faster for you, and it's also going to move these teeth a little bit to give you the room that you need to place the matrix band. Of course, then after you're done prepping the tooth, you pull out the FenderWedge. You should have plenty of room in there then to sneak in one of the little sectional bands. Of course, these things are dead soft. Almost all the matrix band manufacturers now are using a dead soft stainless steel. It's around 10 thousandths in thickness, and so it's very tender, and if there's any contact remaining, that can be very difficult to place. So now let's talk about an alternative to using a FenderWedge. I think FenderWedge, because of the added benefit of protecting the adjacent tooth, is probably the preferred method, but alternatively, you can skip the fender part and wedge. See how that just kind of slid open a little bit as I put that wedge in there? You can put a wedge in, a regular wedge in, while you're cutting the prep. Again, same process. It's going to start to separate the teeth a little bit. I know quite a few doctors who will go ahead and place a regular wedge before they start to prep, simply from the standpoint it compresses the papilla, pushes the gingiva down in between the teeth, and just gives them a little more room to work. And then when they see, as they're cutting the prep, if they see the wedge through there, they're cutting into the wedge and not the papilla, causing, of course, significant bleeding. So they get that added benefit. So just from a standpoint even of even if the contact is going to be broken and you're sure it's going to be broken, pre-wedging can be a really big benefit. So that would be your second choice. Now let's say, hey, you thought you were going to break contact and you get done and you can't get the band in because the teeth are too close together. There is a way to deal with that. It's called a coffee break. And here's how we do the coffee break. We take the separator ring, we pop it on the tooth, we go get a cup of coffee. Or we do a hygiene check or something like that. Come back in 5 minutes. The ring is, in that time, has been pushing the teeth apart, stretching those ligaments out, and now you can come in, remove the ring, and you should have enough room to slide the band in. The benefit of using a ring in that time versus if you hadn't pre-wedged, of course if you pre-wedged you wouldn't have had this issue. If you didn't pre-wedge, rather than putting a wedge in there and then go doing a hygiene check or getting a cup of coffee, the ring isn't going to cause bleeding. Of course, you come back from your coffee break and you pull the wedge out, now you've got some bleeding that you're going to be dealing with when you reinsert the wedge. So the ring is a little bit friendlier to the gingiva. It's going to give you the separation without causing any trauma. So that's how we get it in when the contact is an issue. Let's talk about some band placement tips that can help you out here. I've got a whole series. In fact, I used this one here on that little demo, so we bent it up a little bit. I wanted to show you quickly the kind of the evolution here, because having these different bands, depending on the bands you have in your office, it impacts what tips and tricks might be beneficial for you. So I actually have 5 different bicuspid premolar bands. They're all technically the same size. Back in 97, 98, when Garrison started, this was the size of their bicuspid premolar bands. And then people asked us to make them a little longer, so they wrapped around the tooth a little bit farther for wider prep, so we did this. Then we developed the slick coating, and so we took that band and we coated it with a non-stick material. And then we added these little tabs on the corners for placement, ease of placement. And then the newest full curved band with the placement tab on the occlusal surface. So all of those are the same size. So depending on which band you have in your office, if I take, let's say I take this one here, and I'm going to grab this type of knot because I want to put them on this bicuspid, because I want to demonstrate something for you here. So here we have an MOD on this little guy. When you're using one of the non-tabbed bands, it's a really good idea just to grab a corner of it and bend it out of the way. Okay, that's not hurting that band at all. It allows you it gives you a better angle for placement, and that little corner that's bent is out of the way and is not a problem. And then you can kind of drag them down into position. Okay, so of course you're going to make sure that your band height matches the height of the marginal ridge of the tooth. So that's that goes without saying there. Now I want to grab another one here because I'm going to show you something that can cause you a little bit of a hiccup here on these bands. Now I'm going to grab the corner of of another one of these plain metal bands. Okay. So with these longer series of bands, which, you know, we started out, they were fairly short, then we added quite a bit of length to them. The longer the bands are, the farther they wrap around the tooth, and you might get into a situation where the ends of the band on a smaller tooth, the ends of the bands might be interfering with one another when you're trying to place them. It's a really simple fix. Again, just like I bent this corner, okay, there is nothing wrong with taking a scissors and shortening that band up. Let me show you with this one, because these full curve bands wrap around the tooth so far that I think it'll show you what I'm talking. Look how far that wraps around the tooth. Okay, if I place another one of those, I might have difficulty just placing the band because it's so long, and the other band is interfering with my ability to place this one. See how they kind of overlap and get in each other's way? There's nothing wrong with cutting those things shorter before you place them on a smaller tooth like that. So that can be very beneficial. don't be afraid to modify the band so that it works better for your particular case. I think that's the watchword there is don't be afraid to modify those a little bit. You need to get them in place, and if that requires a little modification, you know, go right ahead. On any of the bands that don't have occlusally centered placement tabs, always grab them by the end. Don't grab them in the center. They've got little, like this one's got little tabs way out on the ends. We'll grab it by that end, bend that band so that it's easy to place. Okay, so again, just a quick recap. Don't be afraid to modify the bands a little bit to simplify placement. That'll make your life a lot easier. And also, when you've got a really narrow interproximal space and maybe contact is not broken, you know, first choice is going to be to start with a fender wedge. Use a fender wedge when you're prepping the tooth, and that's going to eliminate that problem pretty much completely, plus save the adjacent tooth for you. Otherwise, if you don't have fender wedges, pre-wedge while you're prepping, and if you didn't do either of those, then we go to the coffee break method. Pop a ring on, let it sit for a few minutes to separate the teeth, come back, and you should be able to place that band. So next up, we'll be working on question number 4, so keep your eyes peeled for that video.